Well, hello, everybody. Welcome once again to the Van Buren Variety Show. I am Bob Van Buren, your host, and as always, I'm glad you're here, whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching this days, weeks, months from now, even years. Glad you're here. Make sure you check out all the episodes that we've done so far on this show. For our newcomers, just as a reminder, this is a variety show. What that basically means is each week I have an individual guest on to talk about a very interesting topic. It could be their profession, it could be their hobby, special interest, something that they're have been working on, maybe playing a musical instrument, or just show you how to do something like a craft or a hobby. So you never know what you're going to get, so make sure you hit that subscribe button on your phone or your computer, wherever you are, and that way you'll get updates to see what guests are coming up. And if you're like me on these shows, I've always learned something. I love talking to different people about different things, and you, the audience, may have learned a lot of things from watching these shows. But I have to say, as host, it's really benefited me because I get to talk to these guests not only during the show, but a few minutes before we go live and even after we leave the show. So it's been a learning experience. So many talented people out there, so many caring people. And I really appreciate that. People that help one another and share their talents with each other and their information and their expertise. So again, welcome to Van Buren Variety. And as always, I have a great guest tonight to talk about an interesting subject. But before I bring the guest on, let me ask you all watching this a question, okay? And let me just give you a few seconds to think about it, okay? And now this is kind of where the show is going, okay? Here's the question. Is the life you live by design? Okay, let me repeat the question and think really hard. I mean, seriously. Is the life you live by design? Okay, some of you might be saying yes, some of you might be saying no, some of you saying, I don't know. So let's bring the person on that can answer that question better than anybody right now. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to Rustie McDonald, who will hopefully answer that question for us. Hopefully you've had time to think about it. Is the life you live by design? There she is, and there is the question. So first of all, Rustie, welcome to the Van Buren Variety Show.
Thank you so much for having me, and everybody out there, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
So I'll pose the question to you. Do you think, or do you think everybody is living the life by design? What do you mean by the question first?
Well, that's really the interesting and fun part because it's very philosophical, and I think
Okay.
based off of beliefs and environment and your community, it depends on what that means to you.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, my own self, I think that I'm designing the life that I want to live. And I have control and I have power over that, whereas some people don't feel that, where they don't understand what that means. And we get caught up in things that are just noise. And we do have power and control and choices that we can make to live the life that's most fulfilling to us. And I truly, truly believe that every morning before you even get out of bed, you make that choice. You make that
Mm-hmm.
choices to how you want to show up into your day, how you want to show up with your cup of coffee or tea,
Mm-hmm.
how you want to show up at work, and how you want to react to people out there in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that's living life by design because you intentionally acknowledge these choices, and you have more power and control over it than I think people realize.
We've all heard the saying, if someone's in a bad mood, you've heard the saying, well, they got off on the wrong side of the bed, or they got up in a bad
Right.
mood. So now that they've done that, it's pretty much ruined their whole day because that's the mindset they had when they got up.
I think that that's also a choice. I think that we have forgotten that whole lovely art of snap out of it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's not being dismissive and not saying that you're not allowed to feel the way you are feeling. It's acknowledging. Oh, my camera died again.
That's okay. We can still hear you, though. We can
Okay,
still hear you.
perfect. It's acknowledging that you you're in this place, and how are you going to get yourself out of it? And that I think is true with everything.
I see. Yeah, I mean, life is all about choices, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree with that. So now you've written several books, and I will say, on I read your biography, Rusty, you've gone through a lot of tragedies in your life. You
Yes.
know, we all have had bad things happen to us, but you really have. And so, can you kind of tell us, number one, if you don't mind telling some of the things you've gone through, and part two of that question, how has some of the things that's happened to you in the past influenced your writing today?
Ooh, gosh.
We still can't see. We see a picture. We don't see you though.
I know I'm in here somewhere. The camera's being really
That's
wonky. So
okay.
you guys will be fine.
We'll be fine. We can
Um,
hear you. That's fine. That's all that counts. So,
so I think what resonates the most in my writing was it was intentional to heal. It was intentional to heal from domestic violence. It was intentional to heal
oh
from
no.
rape. It was intentional to heal from being raped
Oh,
as a 3-year-old child. It was intentional to really sit down and find a way to grasp the trauma and grasp the emotions. And I felt alone. So in my
oh, I'm sure
writing,
you
I'm able
did.
to
Yeah.
give people something that I never had or never knew was existing. And for this time period, it's very hard to write about those topics.
Sure.
Um, and yet I still feel a calling to share my story because I think people need to know. I think people need to know that they're not alone. And there's so many of us, and it's a ridiculous number of amount of women who are living in domestic violence or who are being utilized for sexual reasons that are not with their will.
Right.
And until you walk in those shoes and until you experience it and until you express the pain and agony that those things cause, you really don't understand how to empathize or be compassionate to that person, or yourself if you're the one who experienced those things.
Sure.
So I made it my mission to share and share and share and share and hug and hug and hug
Absolutely.
and hug. And it's been really powerful over the last 10 years. Somebody asked me what I do for a living, and I said, I make people cry. And it's true, I do. And it's not to be mean and it's not to be cruel. It's that kind of cry, like, oh my God, she understands that kind of cry, that
She knows what
cathartic
I went through.
cry. Right.
Hmm.
And so when you finally find somebody who can relate to you and can understand the emotions and the feeling and the grief, then you feel a little stronger at getting yourself out of it.
Absolutely. You know, when you said that, that kind of brings up a story that I know, a personal story of a young lady that I knew many, 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 many years ago.
Hmm.
And she was in an abusive relationship. She lived with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend was beating her.
Yeah.
And a lot of the girls, you know, were telling her, like, oh, get out of the situation. You know, don't. Why are you still with this guy when he's treating you so mean? And I did not hear this conversation, but I heard about it. She was so either brainwashed or she was just scared to death that maybe she didn't think she could make it on her own. You know, because they were telling her it's not right that this man is beating on you. You know, and
I think
her response was, well, he and I talked about that, and he said that he wouldn't hit me like that if he didn't love me. And I couldn't, I was speechless. I'm like, well, what would he do if he hated her? But she believed that. And so I'm hoping, Rusty, you know, your stories and your books will, women that are going through that, maybe that can break the chain, if you know what I mean.
I think it's very interesting. You know, we were talking about it a little bit earlier in regards to you don't know what you don't know until you know. That's a big thing for me.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's interesting to hear and see people who only know that this is their life. They only know
Hmm.
that to be loved is to be abused.
To be,
If that's the only attention you're going to get.
you hit the nail on the head. Yep. Hmm.
And we as a society have developed that. We've designed that. We've designed it by taking the power away from women. We've designed that about
Hmm.
taking the power away from a man to feel like he's safe and loved by a woman without having to raise his fist. And so I always say it's not the man's fault. I think it's society's fault because we need to raise better sons. We need
It
to
goes both
raise
ways. Hmm.
women who are comfortable and safe in an environment with men who are genuinely safe men.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really difficult when you are looking at, I'm 46 years old, and I can tell you that boys are going to be boys. They're going to pound stuff, and they're going to break stuff, and they're going to blow stuff up and throw things and ride their BMX bikes. And boys don't cry. Whereas girls are only allowed dolls and pots and pans and sewing kits and nurturing things. When I've met military women that will kick your backside.
Oh, I know military women like that too. I sure do. Absolutely.
But women can do both. They can have that warrior spirit as well as that nurturing, healing spirit. And I think that's what intimidates a lot of men historically. But I think it's also the lack of understanding that a man can cry, and then a man can be the guy who sews, and a man is allowed to nurture the child.
Sure.
And it doesn't have to be this hierarchy of violence and studliness. And with TV and drama and poor raising, I think we've gotten to this precipice of where we are socially and society-wise. And it's not wokeism, which I hate that word, but that's where we're at. We're really at this crossroads of understanding, wanting to hold on to what is traditional, and growth and evolution. And if we don't start growing and evolving, we're just going to end up back in cabins and caves. And yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Oh, let's talk about some of your work. You mentioned your very first work, and I'd love to talk about that and how, we talked about some of your life experiences has helped you write the books and some of your goals. So let's bring up this first book. I'll bring it up. And ladies and gentlemen, this is Rustie McDonald's first book. It's called Women of Spirit, Exploring Sacred Paths of Wisdom Keepers. So tell me a bit about your book, Rustie.
That was really, really exciting. That was at a time period in which I was just charting out to be expressive and open with my life. And I'm sure we'll talk about the catalyst there, because you and I talked about that briefly. And I was invited to be a part of this anthology. Several women have a chapter in that book, and it was beautiful. Just beautiful to team up with some amazing creative women who have figured different ways to deal with their adversity, figured out different ways to explore and express their emotions in a very positive and impactful way. And I think that's something that we need to highlight more of, which is why I continue the work that I do. All the negative that we absorb, I think, takes away from the good that we can give to our communities by doing something like Women of Spirit. It was just a very beautiful book, found on Amazon.
So this kind of shows how women to kind of be strong, then I guess you could say, in a way.
Or even weak. There's no shame in being sad. There's no shame in being angry. There's no shame in dealing with your emotions and expressing them. There is a way of doing it, and there's a wallowing period that you need to learn to get out of. And that's hard because we're not taught. We don't have those skills. We're not innately bred with how do you cope from murder? How do you cope from your child being murdered? Like, there's so many stories.
So horrible. Yes.
Oh, I mean, yeah. You do enough of these interviews, you pretty much cover every topic. And so how do you make a positive impact from something so tragic? And that's really what the essence of the work that I do.
Sure, that's
and
great.
That I advocate for is because we all go through something.
There are women out there, we talked about before the show. I'll give you an example. Some women can have something happen to them, maybe not so traumatic as like a rape or the loss of a child, but maybe just something from the past. And it's happened 10, 20, 30 years ago. And it's caused bitterness. They're bitter about what someone did to them, what someone said to them, what they were forced, to go through as far as lifestyle, jealousy, stuff's at work. I mean, especially family. So and they hold on to it for for whatever reason, and they can't let it go. It's just so hard for them to let the bitterness go. They relive it. So how would you help a woman that's having trouble letting go of the past, letting go of the pain, letting go of the bitterness, the constant bitterness?
One of my favorite quotes is a Buddha quote, and he says something along the lines, and I'm going to botch it a little bit, but when you are throwing stones of anger, they're hot stones and they're burning your hand. So imagine that this 20, 30-year-old bitterness, this anger, is the hot stone in your hand, and all you're doing is hurting yourself. You're causing your own cancer, you're causing your own heart attack, you're causing your own wrinkles, you're causing your own inability to live life to the fullest. And that's really hard because we're not used to letting go of that story. Mm-hmm. My first thing is what does that story do for you? Like, you want to hold on to it for 20 or 30 years. Why? Is it making you feel good? Do you feel like you're vindicated for telling the story over and over again? Do you feel like you are empowering yourself, or do you enjoy ripping off the wounds and being bitter, or do you need the attention, whether it's negative or positive, to bring it up again for the umpteenth millionth time?
Sure.
So there's a lot of reasons. Huh?
It's easy to say let it go, but sometimes for people it's very hard to let it go.
Not. And it took me a very long time to let things go. And for me, I'm an artist, I'm a visual person, so I had to write it down, and then I burned it. And then I'd write it down again and burn it again. And I'd write it in a different way and I'd burn it again. So, or I would create something. I would create something and then I would give it away. The person didn't need to know what the story was behind it because it wasn't their story, it was my story. But in the process of physically giving it away, I was able to slowly detach, and it's not going to happen overnight. So especially if somebody who's 20 or 30 years in the same story, in the same bitterness, I can almost guarantee just from a personal experience that story isn't as accurate as it was the first 5 years. And so writing it down and not even sharing it, but having that person write it down and really get down to the accuracy and dig into those memories and say, oh, maybe it wasn't quite like that.
But write it down, and either when you finish writing the whole story, whether it takes,
burn it,
and then either rip it up or shred it or burn it, and it's gone.
Yeah.
That I like that. It's good. You know what? I'm taking a moment about it. There's things that that kind of pinch me every once in a while from the past. So maybe I need to do that too.
My favorite thing to do to celebrate my week, whether it's a good week, a bad week, an indifferent week, is to write down all the positives, and I like to have them somewhere in my person, whether it's in my calendar or on my bathroom mirror, and then take all the negatives, because there are negatives, and throw them on my campfire. You know what?
Yeah.
And so over the years, it's really helped as a coping mechanism to say, okay, this is what's great, and I only want to focus on the great. And here are the obstacles and the hiccups and the crap and the blah, the bills that are overdue, or whatever it is that life throws at you.
Yeah.
There's that beautiful campfire. It's licking and splitting and creating its own magic.
Absolutely.
Throw it in there. Be like, okay, I'm done. That's the end of that.
We have a question from the audience. So I'll bring this question up from Randy Gilbert. Randy wants to know, does Rustie follow the teachings of the Lamas or maybe a Wiccan? Just wondering, had friends that I got chakra stones blessed by this last Dalai Lama.
Ooh, you are so lucky. Actually, I'm a Unitarian Reverend, so I celebrate the spirit of all people. And I love the Dalai Lama. I think he's the cutest little pea in the pod. Just sweet soul. And I too have a jade prayer necklace that Buddhist monks had blessed for me. So when I do my prayers, it's true. Wiccan is actually, it's huge. And they were so wonderful to my daughter. They painted her face as a little rabbit, and it was very cute. Wiccan and paganism, the terms are actually relatively new in the history of religion, but natural arts, natural. My mother's Cherokee Indian, so
Oh,
you know,
wow.
going through and I truly, 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 truly believe doing Native American retreats and going into chant and song is incredibly powerful. If you're Catholic, if you're Christian, if you're Protestant, I have an uncle that's a Protestant preacher, and
Mm-hmm.
they speak in tongues. I think that's the one.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
terrified me when I was a 10-year-old girl. I went to church into his church, and they started dancing and speaking in tongues and snakes and the whole thing. And I'm like, okay, I'm out. But
It's a
really, really
learning
cool.
experience.
It is a learning experience. It's a little shocking. Um, but again, chant and prayer and affirmations and whatever it is, for me, if I'm having a really bad day, I blare up techno. I'm very honest about that. I blare up some techno and I just rock it out to 90s techno.
That boom, boom,
It,
boom, 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 boom,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And somebody said, "Oh, that's really bad for your energy. It lowers your energy level. It's so loud." And I'm like, "No, actually, the heartbeat that a baby feels in the womb is very similar." And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's why it's comforting to me is
That's
I just
great.
get to let go and be comforted by the sounds of drums. So some people like heavy metal, some people like acid metal, whatever.
Jazz, you know?
Some people like, right. Um, I know people who get down to some really good Pavarotti.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever rocks your boat, that's totally cool. Do it in a safe and wonderful, kind and forgiving way. And it will definitely change your attitude. And I don't think your attitude has to be the whole day. It's just that moment.
Right. What? I mean, it's man, that's a lot of great stories you've got there. I like your positive vibe too, and I'm
Yeah.
sure that shows up in your book. Now we talked about one of your books just now, but I'd like to talk about this one in particular. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, this one's called In Pride and Prejudice, not just Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah,
This
I
is
had to be
In
careful with
Pride and
that one.
Prejudice. But it's called, if in case you can't read the writing, ladies and gentlemen, it says A Mother's Journey of Fighting for Her Daughter's Rights. I think
Yeah.
that should touch everybody, if anybody has a child. So, and written by our guest here, Rustie McDonald. So, Rustie, tell us about In Pride and Prejudice. What got you started writing this? What was your influence on this?
My frustration with the legal system was quite large, considering I did everything that I could in my life to be a outstanding citizen, following the law, never having a parking ticket, doing good, volunteering, all of these wonderful things. And then it came to requiring help from my ex-husband, who's very abusive,
Mm-hmm.
um, to protect my daughter from his abuse. And there are no laws to do so. And he literally put his 300-pound body on her 7-year-old body and
Oh no.
basically strangled her to keep her from calling 911 on the phone.
Mm.
And the court said, well, he didn't bruise her.
Really?
Mhm.
He didn't bruise her.
He didn't bruise her. And so it was
Wow.
it was a 12. It got so bad that he was able to utilize the court. I ended up in jail for 4 days.
Okay, can I just ask a personal question? Did he know the judge? Did he know a lawyer, or did he have pull? Or can you talk
It's
about that?
it's the money game. So he had
Oh.
money and I did not. And that's back to women having choices and not being empowered. So it's a lot more complicated than the TV makes it sound.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I had to figure out how to find daycare without any family or relatives to work a full time job, but I couldn't get a full time job because I couldn't afford the daycare. So I had to do part time work
Mm-hmm.
surrounding her school, but I was only making $45 to $50 a day.
Mm-hmm.
How do you come up with 23, 24, $25,000 in legal bills? So
Wow.
it's the way the system is set up, and a lot of this book actually has true testimony court papers in it. It has the testimony of the guardian ad litem, which was just very pro dad versus pro child, and the
Mm-hmm.
whole purpose of a guardian ad litem is supposed to be pro child. Um, and how I had to let things go. I had to say, fine, I'm guilty. I interfered with child custody. Give me a misdemeanor. Fine. Otherwise, I'd have 3 years of a very public and ugly court battle in a state that is very anti-woman.
So would you say, in your personal experience, I mean, you've got the experience, is it more, is it usually dad versus mom, mom versus dad, or is it which one has the most money?
It's the bank account.
So the woman could have more money and it'd be against the dad, or the dad could have more money against the mom. Whoever has shows the green, you know.
It's all about the dollars. All about the dollars. And unfortunately, what really turned into a huge part of the book wasn't just the sadness of the journey that we went through and how tough and wrong it was for this little girl to not have a choice. She still doesn't have a choice. She's 17. Oh, and he's spent this whole summer verbally and emotionally abusing her. And there's nothing I can do about that. And she still has to go and see him on the holidays. And I'm like, I'm not going to make her this time. I'm just not.
Mm-hmm. I mean, does she have a choice? If I can ask this, does she have a choice? No,
never has. And that's
wrong.
That's the largest issue when you have teachers, therapists, you have community members, we had around 65 to 70 people testify as to why this isn't a good idea. And the judge still said the father has the right to see his daughter. No matter what
the daughter wants to or not.
Exactly. And so it's been a very hard battle. And, she has PTSD now. And
that's horrible.
She is a great kid. She's graduating college October 15th, and she's graduating high school in May.
Good for her.
Yeah, she's a hot ticket. And throughout it all, she's my hero.
You know, Randy has a personal story kind of like yours, a sad story. I'll bring that up here. It says, no bruising for the courts, meant no abuse. I know men, soldiers of mine, that knew how to use a book and a pillow to beat their wives, but not leave bruises.
I know cops like that.
That's just wrong. In other words, unless there's a mark on the victim here, they won't touch them.
That's correct. It's considered parental rights to discipline. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Okay.
You're right. This book that you wrote, all your books I highly recommend, but this one is really, really personal because it's a personal fight that you've had, and in my opinion, you've exposed, a very, very terrible system. In our courts.
What was even worse about that is, as I wrote the book, and I had a couple of lawyers read it to make sure that I wasn't going to get in trouble for incrimination or anything like that. Some parts of it ended up getting leaked out. So every time I'd cross over that state border, magically, I'd get pulled over. Magically.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like they're looking for you, basically.
I think it's more intimidation because in that particular state, there is an organization that was designed by legislators called the Red Pill Society. And that society is a group of men, specifically, that want to teach you how to legally date rape. Legally.
There's the key word. Wow.
Yeah. And how to have a submissive wife. And everything that everybody's talking about now with the Handmaid's Tale, they've been devising this for years. And there is a subset of humans that feel that that's the right way to treat another human being. And so here we are, flash forward, and it's undoubtedly terrifying to know that there are people still advocating for that kind of behavior and that kind of domination over another person because they can.
Right. I'm going to go to the next topic, but Randy, I won't display it on there. He is saying, verbatim, can Rustie adjust her camera to the left? I see only half her face. But Randy,
I'm trying.
She's having camera problems, Randy, so bear with her. She's really trying. There, can you see her face?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why the camera. It's just being wonky. So I
Yeah.
apologize, Randy.
Okay, let me bring this up really quick as a comment. This is your website.
That is correct.
And ladies and gentlemen, I would highly recommend you go there because this gives Rustie's biography is in here. If you really want to see and hear some of the unbelievable struggles that she's gone through, more than what a normal human being should have to go through. But I'll just leave it to you, Rustie. People go to your website there, rustie.info. What will they see? What all do you have on your website?
So I have this wonderful group called Project Army. Part of
Project
the
what?
proceeds, Project Army.
Army, okay.
Part of the proceeds of building my website, they actually donate to wounded warriors, and I just love,
like
love this group, and highly recommend if you want to get a website built because it's such a great cause, and they're a great group of people. So slowly we're building it out, and you'll see attachments to my YouTube, my blogs, my channel on medium.com. I'm working very diligently on trying to get more media put up. It's just been this season of my life has been a little hectic and chaotic. So I'm hoping January will be a good fresh start and I'll have extra time on my hands to do what I love to do, which is travel around the world and talking to people like you.
That's awesome. And we're on YouTube, so this goes worldwide for sure.
Yeah, it's so amazing.
But you mentioned you have a blog. How do people come see your blog if they'd like to?
Medium.com. I'm on Medium.
Medium.com. And
Yeah.
you have you say you have a YouTube channel too?
I do. Yep. I think you actually subscribed to it. So
I did here a while back.
I want to be able to share this video as well to give you more.
Okay. Is it under Rustie? Is that the name of the channel, Rustie Mcdonald? Does it have a name to it?
I think so. It's either that or Living and Thriving with Rustie. So,
okay. I think
by
it
the
was
way,
Rustie
you'll find it on
McDonald.
my website.
So, okay. How often do you do your blog? Is it certain times or just irregularly? Or
My blogs prior to the last couple of months with moving, they were weekly. And my YouTubes were weekly for season, so 6 months. And then I would switch over to my blog talk radio for 6 months and then back to video. I have 700 or 800 people in my inbox that are wanting to get onto the show. So it's just been crazy trying to juggle everything by myself.
So you have people on your show then as a guest.
Oh, yeah.
You're the host. Okay.
Yeah. That's why when you were telling me about your international people, I'm like, yeah, I can totally relate. It's very humbling to know that your story can go so far.
And these people, on average, every person's different. Do they come on your show just talk about maybe some traumatic events in their own life, or just want to get more information from you, how you survived? How did usually the conversations go?
It's definitely an interesting. I ask very simple questions because I want to sit next to you at a Starbucks or coffee shop or a tea shop or even have a glass of wine with you and just have a conversation. And there's so much relaxation that happens and so much more you get to learn about that person and their experience when you genuinely just say, hey, I want to get to know you a little better. Nothing's preset. I don't do pre-interviews. I don't even talk to them before the show because I want it fresh out of the gate as though we literally just sat at the bus stop. And it's beautiful. The chemistry with some people I literally could couch surf for the rest of my life across the world if I wanted to, because I've just been so blessed with the amount of people that are willing to share their stories and their trades. And I have an affinity for people who take yucky things and turn them into something positive for the community. I don't know. Did you ever watch Dirty Jobs?
I've seen it. That's the one with Mike.
Mike Rowe.
That's him. Yeah. He's done some some intense things. I was like, okay.
I kind of think of my show as the Dirty Job spiritually. So it's tough stuff that people don't necessarily really want to dig into, but they've been brave enough to at least do it for 45 minutes, and
Absolutely.
it's saved lives, and that's really impactful to me.
I'm glad you're there to kind of guide them through these choppy waters, I guess you could say.
Everybody needs a friend.
Absolutely. I want to bring up list of all of your books, and we've talked about two of them, but
Yeah.
there's two more here that I think one or two that we haven't spoken about, and there actually is a book that's coming up that we'll talk about later. But let's talk about the books you have. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is all of Rustie's books that are available. So here that is. We've talked a little bit about In Pride and Prejudice. That's the first one on your left. And then the third one from your left, The Women of Spirit, we've talked about. But the one that's higher, the second one, it's called, and ladies and gentlemen, if you can't read that writing from where your screen, the name of the book is called Having Tea with My Skeletons. So it's not like a scary book, but it's not a scary book. It's called Having Tea with My Skeletons. So, Rustie, what's this book about? Having Tea with My Skeletons.
The catalyst for that book was to, in my grief, in my sorrow and my sadness and my holding on to stories and trying to learn to live a happy and thriving life from such sadness and wounds, how was I going to effectively deal with all of that stuff? And it's a lot of really powerful stuff. I've had people get through the first couple of chapters and put it down and they just can't read it because it's very to the point.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, it just hits them too raw. And so maybe later they can read it. But it's me sitting down with each of my skeletons that are in my closet and saying, okay, hey, you're here, I'm here. We were forced together. Now what? Because you need to move on. I want to move on. And so in that process, I took each and every event in my life that I held on to or still remembered or still hurt from. And I had a conversation, and you get to read that conversation. I think it's very cathartic, and I highly recommend anybody who is trying to move forward in their life to have that conversation with their own skeleton, because we all have them.
We all do. We all carry them, you know.
And I try to do any and everything that I do. I try to do it in a soft and gentle way, even though this book it describes how I was molested. It describes blood flowing down my face from abuse. So It's very detailed, but it needed to be, because I had to get that skeleton out of my closet.
You can't pretty that up. Yeah, absolutely.
You really can't. You can't, and it's not meant to shame anyone. It's not meant to, it is what it is, and the rear view mirror is smaller than the windshield, right? So, but you can't pretty it up. And sometimes you have to get good and ugly and do that ugly cry and swear a lot and have a day in bed.
Absolutely.
And just get through it, because you have a story. Everybody has a story, or a multitude of stories. It's really what the ending is going to be, like we were talking about earlier. How are you going to end your life? What does that chapter look like? And that's where I think you get the choice to design your life. You get the choice to create what it is that you really want. And
absolutely.
You came into this world by yourself, you're going out by yourself, so you might as well enjoy it.
Having Tea with My Skeleton. That's a good title. In fact, Strangeland even says, wonderful name for a book on that topic. I agree.
Thank you.
I could also even say, the title is, Having Tea with My Skeletons. It also could be, Having Tea with My Demons, that keep chasing me,
Yeah. And I, as someone who lives with PTSD, CPTSD, which is one of the books that will be coming out soon.
Okay.
I lovingly name my rabid squirrels. I have rabid squirrels. They try to convince me that I go right when I need to go left, and I have to sit them down and say, you know what, not today. and it's a different way of coping, to just make a little light of a hard situation.
We have another question from the audience watching this live. Gary Spikes wants to know, Rustie, do you have a degree or just work off of life experience? Good question, Gary.
So I have my degree. I have a BA in psychology, and I minored in art.
Oh, wow.
Art therapy is what I wanted to be when I grew it up. I have 17 certificates in spiritual practices, and I constantly learn. I'm constantly in the learning mode. I love being certified over and over again with different subjects because it's freeing and it's exciting and it's exciting to learn. So yes and yes, I would say.
Yeah, good question, Gary. Thank you. Let's go back to this other book's subject, and I apologize, Rusty. On my screen, I can't read the last that book on the very right hand corner. It's beautiful something. What is it called?
Simply Beautiful, and it was another anthology of a group of women that wanted to share and express what life is in a beautiful way. I want to say
Simply
that
beautiful.
came out around.
Okay. It's
It
written
came
by
out
different
around
women. There's
Valentine's. Yeah, yeah.
okay.
And it's more of a self-love, self-appreciation book. So it really, I've actually have still a lot of contact with most of the authors in that book, so that's been lovely.
Yeah. And it's called Simply Beautiful. Okay.
Yes.
And like you kind of brought it up briefly earlier, but let's just say that there's someone watching this live right now, or days, weeks, months, even years from now, and they're interested in one or perhaps two or all these books. Where would you suggest they go? On your own website to buy them? Where else
Eventually,
can
they're
they
going to be
go?
on my website. But again, that's taking time because it's only me.
Uh-huh.
I know that Women of Spirit is still, they just came out with another anthology. There's a Women of Spirit 2, but that should
Women's
still be on
Spirit.
Amazon. And
Okay.
Simply Beautiful is on Amazon. And I have one more that it's very difficult to get in America because I co authored with shamans and different spiritual teachers in Australia a few
Oh
years
wow.
ago. And that was healing something. I can get that for you if you need it. But that's been hard to get in America the last few years just because of exporting and all of that.
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me just kind of ask you this. Let's just say there's someone watching this right now. We don't know who all's watching this live, or you
They
know,
get to see my big old eyeball.
yeah. Yeah, you like that, Randy? You couldn't see her
Right?
face, but you can see her
Sorry.
eyeball.
I feel like a minion.
Yeah, she's watching you.
Mhm.
Well, let's just say there's somebody out there, whether they're watching live or maybe they've had a traumatic experience. I mean, just throw it out there. You can't say pretty like child abuse, rape, a physically abusive relationship, or even just a really really bad boss is causing a hostile environment.
Mm,
I
I
mean,
can
I know it's
afford
so simple to say, well, just get out of that situation, but it's not so easy. So, what would you say specifically to someone who maybe is grown now, but as a child either experienced physical abuse, perhaps even sexual abuse, and just something really mental abuse is just as bad? What would you say to that now grown man or grown woman even?
I think you can go one of three ways with experience. I would say there's three kinds of people.
Okay.
There are people who are proactive and they want to learn and they want to change and they want to grow and they want to evolve and they want to be compassionate and empathetic and they're aware. There are people that like to stick their head in the sand. This never happened. I don't see anything. Life's good. I live in my little microcosm and that we're good.
No, see no
And
evil, speak no evil, hear no evil.
yeah. And then there are people who are bleep this and bleep that and what is the new thing, Karens, that group of people that are just they thrive on being angry and hostile and derogatory and
Hmm.
in that little red ant pot. And so you have a choice as to where you want to end your story, and it all goes back to the ending of the story. So how do you want to design your life? Do you want to be an angry person who's screaming at people and flipping them off the red light because they stopped
Hmm.
and it was a red light and you wanted them to keep going? That happened to me today, actually. It was quite funny.
I get that
That's
a
a
lot.
keeper. Or do you want to be somebody who wants to overcome your obstacles and learn that challenges aren't necessarily a bad thing because you don't grow? There's not a root on this planet. There's not a plant on this planet that doesn't have to push through the darkness in order to grow and
Hmm.
find what fulfills them, whatever that means. And that's
Absolutely.
personal, whatever fulfills you. Or you can just pretend nothing ever happened and live in your little microcosm and live that way. And so that's what I believe free will is. I believe
Sure.
you make those choices. And so you can do that many, many ways. There's tons of self help books out there, there's
Yeah.
tons of therapists, and
Yeah.
there are tons of groups. There's there's no reason for a person not to get the help that they need, other than not being willing to deal with the darkness that might come.
Sure. Because they might be thinking embarrassed, or I mean,
Oh, that's a big one.
yeah. And when you're the victim, you're afraid to share that. But I mean, I would tell people that watching this, if you're going through something really traumatic, don't be afraid. I mean, it's because if you're keeping
You're
it
going to be
secret,
afraid, and that's, I think I would probably reword that a little differently. It's okay to be afraid, and it's okay
okay.
to be sad, and it's okay to be angry, and it's okay to be hurt, and it's okay not to trust.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, for many reasons, people have taken that away from many, many people.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's not okay for you to give up on yourself. And it's not okay for you to forget that you were a valuable person and you were worthy of something better. And in order
Absolutely.
to have that better, you have to do the work and you have to reach out. And you don't have to trust, but you do have to learn to love yourself, because at the end of the day, it's just you, baby.
Sure. Got a comment again from the audience. Strangeland says, "That's great, Rusty. Do you see your writing and putting yourself out there as a key part of your healing?" I missed a few minutes, so in case you've already answered. So, do you feel like when you write, it's part of your own self healing?
Absolutely. I think for me, the only reason why I've been put on this planet and been put through the war zones that I've been put through is so that I can be brave enough and say, "Hey, you're not alone, and we can do this together, or you can do it by yourself, or however you want to do it." But at first, I can tell you, it was very embarrassing to share my story. And like I
Mm-hmm.
told you earlier, I was laid off from a firm that I was working for several years.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting and having lunch with a person that I've had lunch with for years, and she never knew I was married
After all those years.
after all those years. And it dawned on me how much I compartmentalized my personal versus my professional, because I just didn't want people to know. Didn't want to be seen as weak, didn't want to be seen as vulnerable, didn't want to be, seen as something that couldn't be relied on.
Mm-hmm.
People look at other people who are struggling as baggage, and I've never understood that.
Yeah,
um,
that's true.
and so we get, and this goes back to all that noise I was referring to earlier. Like, the idiot box really is what it
Yep,
is. It's
I
an
agree
idiot
with
making
you.
box.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I hate that thing. But in that, we forget to be community, and we've forgotten what it's like to reach out a hand and just be nice. You don't have to be a Karen. You don't have to flip somebody off at the red light because, well, they're stopping at the red light. Hello.
Or going too slow or whatever.
You know, it's just so bizarre how we've de-evolved in so many ways. Um, and I'm hoping more people with adversity chime up and start speaking and helping, because it takes a whole village. It really does. Um, it's very powerful to, I highly challenge anybody listening to have one sentence and five different people, five very, very different people,
Mm-hmm.
read that one sentence in a room of people. And I can guarantee there are going to be people that are only resonated with one or two of the people reading the same sentence. And it's because we like to attract what we like and what we know. And it's very hard for us to go outside of our knowledge and our own base and comfort zone,
A
right?
little box there,
Yeah. And so we've designed a society where we stay in our little comfort box, and we're afraid to go out of it. So when
Mm-hmm.
something really bad happens, it's very scary to think that you're going to talk about it with somebody else. It's very scary to
Oh
say,
yeah.
"Oh, well, I'm going to go see my therapist this afternoon." And you're like, "Oh no, I've got a dentist appointment." Well, that's the
Yeah.
third dentist you've seen this
There's
month.
nothing wrong with me. Yeah.
Right?
Heard that one before.
Hmm. And I'm not an advocate for pharmaceuticals at all, but I do think in some cases maybe that'll help. Um, but I am very, 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 very much an advocate of reaching out and saying, or even watching podcasts like this, or reading self-help books or listening to self-help podcasts, there are things that you can do to prepare you for having the one-on-one conversation with a therapist or a psychologist or in a group. And I can absolutely guarantee you, I can 1000% guarantee you, there is nothing that you have been witness to or have done that somebody else hasn't already done.
Many times over.
Many times over. So if you look at the statistics on suicide and rape and pedophilia, and you're not alone by any stretch of the imagination.
Absolutely.
And so the embarrassment should slowly wipe away, realizing that you're not alone.
Absolutely. I'd like to talk about now, you said we've talked about the books that you have written so far, but you've got one coming up.
That's been a hard one.
I'm going to bring this one up, ladies and gentlemen. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this one's not available yet, but you want to go to Rustie's website and keep checking because it will be available someday. We'll let her talk about it. It's called The Truth About Poverty, and it's based on her true story. So, Rustie, kind of intrigue us with this one.
So this one is really about being a child in the 80s and standing in the food shelf line for hours at the Salvation Army in Florida and hiding food and giving it to the person behind me. It's about being homeless at a time period where I was actually making decent money, but being a single income, I couldn't afford housing. It's about the first time ever applying for government benefits. And you hear this on the news all the time, how easy it is to get, and being denied because I was taking my daughter away from her father. It's exactly the reason why I was denied. It wasn't because I needed them or did not need them. It was because of her political and preference of a two-parent home. So it gets into, what does $45 a day actually make your favorite waitress at Longhorns or wherever, and how much is her rent? And right now we're really in this tough place where homelessness is exponential. It's beyond words. And people are turning their backs because they think that this is a capitalist society, so I should rent my, one-bedroom shed for $3,000 a month. And okay, yes, you should if that's what you choose, but here's the impact. We're losing teachers, we're losing civil servants, we're losing community people, we're losing people that actually make the community work and function because their wages are so low and they can't live here.
They can't pay rent.
They can't pay rent. And the way we have the society set up is you're punished for not being able to meet those demands. And 3 or 4 jobs should be normal, right?
Yeah.
So your well-being and your well-being of your children and mental health, my goodness, let's not even start there on the mental health aspect. If you're a full-time single mom, you've got kids, and you have to work 3 or 4 jobs just to keep a roof over your kid's head, who's loving and cherishing and nourishing your children?
Exactly.
Wow. Here's the reality of what poverty is. And it's not that a person is undereducated. I know people with PhDs that are living in their van right now because they can't afford they can't afford rent. Or they can't find a job that is equitable to their degree. And then I hear people who are going belaborously on trades. And yes, absolutely. I think we should encourage trades 100%. But you can't charge so much for the trades and have 8-hour school days on top of working 3 or 4 jobs.
Exactly.
So we have to adjust and bend. And that's not a political thing. It's a financial thing. And if we want this country to grow and thrive, we need to stop importing people from other countries to do the jobs that we can do if we were to provide better education and more accommodating factors like childcare.
Sure. Do you have a release date for this book, The Truth About Poverty?
I'm rewriting a couple of chapters to not be so blunt. I'm
Well,
tend
sometimes
to be a
blunt
little.
is good, though.
Yeah, but I want people to read the book. Like I
Oh,
want
that's
them to walk
true.
away going, "Hey, yeah, I got it," instead of "She's such a,"
You know what?
so
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm gonna get that anyway, but less is better. So I'm hoping December of 23. It's about 3 chapters I'm still into that I'm trying to orchestrate where it makes sense. It's not an easy topic. Economics is not an easy topic, and as much as any news program that you watch, it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on, they don't make it easy. They don't keep it simple. And it really is very simple to keep a budget, right? But
Hmm.
the income and the outgo and what the reality is, here in the state of Florida, they nickel and dime you for everything. And that off puts the inability to make wages here because it's mostly hotel hospitality. So we're seasonally based, but we're seasonally based on a minimum wage carryover, and yet
Sure.
we've grown 57% in real estate value in this last since COVID. 57%. We're the most expensive state in the country.
Wow.
I want to say that we're exceeding California, which is mind-boggling to me
That
because
is.
it
That is
used to be
mind-boggling for
77%
sure.
less. So, and there is the ideology that it's capitalism, but there's also the understanding that with any endeavor, you have to have balance.
Sure.
And so I want to carefully outline the reality versus making it a political thing because it's not. It's common sense.
Sure. Well, Rusty, it's been a very, very interesting talk with you. I do want to put your website up here again. It's just simply Rusty, but that's Rusty with an IE, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
Rusty.info. You will find all of her biography, her very interesting biography, and her amazing road to just surviving in itself is good. And then there you can also read about her books that you'll see there. Uh, the, there's 3 books that she's written, and the very bottom one, Simply Beautiful, is a compilation book from different women and their own stories too. So, Rusty, it's been a very, very interesting show. I wish you the best of luck, and I would
Thank
love to
you.
have you back on the show again to
Thank
talk
you.
about the book that's coming up.
All right. Let's make a date.
We sure will. All right, Rusty. I hope you have a great evening, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for tonight's show of the Van Buren Variety Show. Again, I tell you again, for all you newcomers, make sure you hit that subscribe button because that really does help. And if you like the video, don't just watch the video and then click off. There is a like button there. So click that like button, and I'm sure our guests would really, really appreciate that. And if you didn't catch this show live, if you're watching this days, weeks, months after the fact, you can leave a comment in the comment section. And if you have a question for Rusty, I'll make sure she sees it. But remember, Rusty has her own YouTube channel out here on YouTube. So go to YouTube and look up Rustie McDonald. That's Rustie McDonald. And she also has a blog that you can also look at. And you can get more information on that on her website. So kudos to Rusty, a great person, a great survivalist, and I'm looking forward to reading her books as well. So that is going to do it for me tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad you all tuned in. Remember that I'm on here once a week with an interesting guest and an equally interesting topic. So hope you all have a great week, and I'll see you next time. Good night, everybody.